Recep Tayyip Erdogan is back as president of Turkey for another 5 years.
As the cost of living continues to soar, analysts are now wondering whether Erdogan will abandon his unusual policy.
His political challenge yet to his increasingly authoritarian rule, now set to enter its third decade.
So it's reasonable to expect more turmoils, more inflation, and maybe lower interest rates.
Turkey, once a shining example of democracy in the Middle East, is now facing a serious threat to its democratic institutions. The country has been a democracy for over a century, but in recent years, there have been concerns that it is becoming increasingly authoritarian. In 2017, Erdogan held a referendum that gave him new powers, including the ability to appoint judges and prosecutors. This has led to accusations that he is trying to create a one-man rule. Many elections before, rumors of Recep Tayyip Erdogan's political demise turned out to be vastly exaggerated. However, the winner of this election will have to reckon with an unstable economy and a nation still devastated by the earthquakes, which killed thousands in February. So why is Turkey on the brink of dictatorship? How did Erdogan manage to win with so much going against him? And finally, what does this mean for the rest of the world? This was one of the world's most important elections anywhere this year, because of Turkey's outsized role in the global economy and in a series of crises around the world. Turkey is a member of NATO, a member of the G20, and is a key ally in the fight against terrorism. On the other hand, you have Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the long-serving leader of Turkey's largest opposition party. He came into the first round of the election with high hopes that he could win in the first round by winning 50% outright. But he failed to do so. And so he entered the second round at a significant disadvantage. But with nearly all the ballot boxes opened in the second round of Turkey's presidential elections on May 28th, Erdogan had earned 52.1% of the vote, enough to claim victory, whereas his challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, had only 47.9%. This was Erdogan's most difficult challenge. Almost 90% of eligible voters turned out. And the reason there was so much uncertainty around this election is the state of Turkey's economy, which is in the grips of a currency crisis that is largely of Erdogan's own making. Yet Mr. Erdogan, who has already ruled Turkey for 20 years, first as prime minister and then as president, will now be able to do so for another 5, and perhaps more. Locals said they trusted only one man with their votes, and with the earthquake recovery effort. His opposition had the best shot in a generation of unseating Mr. Erdogan. 6 opposition parties had settled on a comprehensive reform program and on a presidential candidate. The economy had been, and continues to be, affected by inflation that topped 86% last year, largely the result of a bizarre monetary policy that saw low interest rates as the way to bring down consumer prices. He has pressured the central bank into slashing interest rates in spite of the country's high rate of inflation that has driven inflation even higher. And this cost of living crisis is what has driven a lot of people away from the ruling party. The February earthquakes, which covered an area the size of Bulgaria with rubble, exposed shoddy building methods, corruption, and a lack of preparedness. The response to the earthquakes largely broke down along political lines, where existing supporters of the government still supported the government. As always, even this did not have any effect. The people said that they trusted the government to rebuild, and Erdogan to be the one to stabilize the country. There were very few people who changed their minds based on the earthquake. But none of that was enough to defeat Mr. Erdogan. Using the same playbook that has helped him win election after election, Turkey's strongman won again by fanning the flames of Turkey's culture wars and depicting the opposition as a threat to Turkish culture and national security. He used the backing Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu received from the country's main Kurdish party to accuse his opponent of teaming up with the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Media bias helped too. Private news channels, mostly run by businessmen beholden to Mr. Erdogan, and the state media, which has become an arm of his government, offered the president limitless airtime, refusing to challenge his unfounded claims. Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu appeared mostly on social media and on a handful of channels close to the opposition. His late attempts to win over the hard right by promising to send millions of refugees based in Turkey back home and ruling out peace talks with the PKK did not go according to plan. A chance to repair Turkey's democracy and its economy is now lost, though the opposition had promised to reverse Mr. Erdogan's creation of a powerful one-man rule, to release at least some of Turkey's political prisoners, and to hand power back to nominally independent state institutions. It made no effect whatsoever. Mr. Erdogan now retains a free hand to rule as he pleases, using the unchecked powers he has accumulated to keep the courts, the central bank, and his own party in line. Soon, instead of poll numbers and election results, Turks will have to start watching the exchange rate. To help Mr. Erdogan's chances in the elections, the central bank has been selling billions of dollars in foreign reserves every week, so as to prevent a run on Turkey's currency, the lira, and keep inflation from spiraling out of control. The result is a currency that is overvalued, despite having lost 80% of its value against the dollar over the past 5 years. But problems are mounting. The central bank's net foreign reserves are now in negative territory for the first time since 2002. Including swaps with local lenders in foreign countries, net reserves are estimated to be over $70 billion in the red. Signs of stress are already visible. The lira has fallen by 2% since the first round of the presidential elections, dipping to a record low of 20 to the dollar. Unless Mr. Erdogan reverses course and decides to raise interest rates, the currency will plunge as soon as the central bank runs out of ways to defend it. Mr. Erdogan has suggested this will be his last term. That does not necessarily have to be true. According to constitutional amendments that Mr. Erdogan pushed through in 2017, a president in his second term can run for a third if parliament calls a snap election before the end of his mandate. Since Mr. Erdogan's coalition has 323 out of 600 seats in the assembly, this could easily be made to happen. Assuming his health holds up, he could remain in power well into the 2030s. It is too early to say for sure whether Turkey will become a dictatorship, but the signs are not good. Erdogan has shown a clear disregard for democratic norms, and he is not afraid to use his power to silence his critics. If he's not stopped, Turkey could become the latest example of a democracy that has fallen victim to authoritarianism. In terms of what this means for the rest of the world, Erdogan is one of the world's more influential leaders, especially in the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. He has been a mediator in that crisis in terms of brokering a deal between Russia and Ukraine to unblock food exports from Ukraine, and that block brought down the price of food around the world last year. He's also holding up the expansion of NATO by blocking Sweden's accession to the alliance over his concerns about alleged Kurdish militants that he says are living in Sweden. He's expanded Turkish influence around the world by exporting Turkish drones and other weaponry. So what's at stake is whether Erdogan's role as a linchpin geopolitically will continue or not.